Peaceful protests gave way to rioting in Baltimore following the death of Freddie Gray on April 19th. Gray died of spinal cord and other injuries sustained while in police custody. And then as a result, obviously there was some unrest in Boston and in Baltimore, and our colleague, Ray Lewis, had to talk about it.
Violence is not the answer. Violence has never been the answer. Freddie Gray, we don't do nothing for him doing this. We know there's a deeper issue. We know what the jungle looks like. But this isn't it. It's enough of us in the streets trying to change what's going on. Baltimore, get off the streets. Kids, go home. Stay home. You don't have no right to do what you're doing to this city. Too many hardworking people build this city.
Obviously, Ray Lewis, the Baltimore Raven for 17 seasons, that was his plea for peace. Meanwhile, for the very first time in Major League Baseball history, they will have the game tonight. The Orioles will play, actually, this afternoon, but there will be no crowd. That is by design. Stephen A., I'll start with you first. I think we all want to share our comments about what's happening in Baltimore, but what was your reaction?
Well, first of all, I was proud of my brother Ray Lewis for taking the initiative to, spread the message that he spread. We all know he's a future Hall of Fame. He starred in Baltimore for 17 years. Nobody's flawless, neither is he. But his conscience, being conscientious about his community at large, is something that should be commended. I did the same thing on my radio show yesterday on Sirius XM. I see a lot of athletes are trying to do the same. And you just look at what's transpiring, and something needs to be said. We got a lot of folks out there that are suffering and going through trials and tribulations. And we talk about police brutality. We have to understand the difference between police brutality and a brutal act by a particular police officer. When you say police brutality, what you're doing is you're inciting a nation of individuals out there to go and act in a very belligerent and, dare I say, criminal fashion against law enforcement officials. And where do you think that's going to get them? What do you think is going to happen to them? Do you really, really think that you can go up against law enforcement officials? First of all, you're wrong. And more importantly than anything else, you're not going to win. And if you lose, you're not going to just lose in terms of a battle with them. You may lose your life. And so we need to be cognizant of that, and we need to spread the message to them that, again, violence is not the answer. And then when you get into the rioters, the looters, those engaging in vandalism, the part that I find incredibly disgusting is how anybody out there could sit there and support those kind of actions. Our president, Barack Obama, stated it best. They should be treated like criminals. You are victimizing and vandalizing your own community. The very people that you're sitting there and claiming to be in unison with in terms of being victims, not having your needs, your desires addressed or what have you, are the very people you're looting and vandalizing and all of that other stuff. It's irresponsible, it's criminal, it's unnecessary, it's wrong, and that needs to be said. The other thing that I'd like to say is this. On many, many occasions, we are so quick to point out the things that professional athletes do wrong. But by and large, the vast majority of them are doing the right things. When I think about a Dwayne Wade, when I think about a Kobe Bryant, when I think about a LeBron James, when I think about a Carmelo Anthony, who also is from Baltimore and spoke out against this, the list goes on and on. You have successful individuals that do serve as an example of what you should be striving not only to do, but to be, because of the way they've grown. The maturation process has infected their life and the way they go about the business of conducting themselves on a day-to-day basis. And it ain't just because they're successful. They're successful because they were wise enough to know how to conduct themselves before they became successful. So these are all the things that I would think that people would look at and recognize and appreciate, because we got some problems out here, just like Ray Lewis said. We certainly have some problems within the African-American community, but one of the biggest problems we have is that we're not looking inward. We're busy looking outside at everybody else, what everyone else has done to us, what history has done to us, how it has affected us, etc., etc. But guess what? I'm here to tell you something. I haven't heard this said, Skip, on the airwaves. Our ancestors, considering our history and what they had to go through and the sacrifices that they had to make to get us to this point, our ancestors will be ashamed.
That's right.
Of how we're conducting ourselves.
That's fair.
And it needs to be said, and it needs to be addressed, and it needs to be stopped. Because I see a whole bunch of young brothers and sisters out here right now. They're here with us. They wouldn't act that way. They wouldn't act that way. There's no excuse for this, and it's a no-win proposition. You are going to lose if you continue to conduct yourself this way, and more importantly, if you pick up the phone, go on Twitter or social media or whatever, and condone this type of behavior. That's hooliganism. That is criminal activity going on, and it is against our own community. There are elder black folks who are suffering at the hands of these looters, vandalizers, etc. Law enforcement is going to deal with them.
Stephen, you make some really good points. You talk about frustration. You say our ancestors would be ashamed, and I think that is a fair way to describe what's happening when we're talking about riots. And Skip, I've shared this with you. I grew up through the riots.
Yep.
I remember that was the scariest feeling that I've ever had. The saddest feeling that I've ever had, to watch our community literally be burned to shreds. And at the end of the day, for days, weeks, months, we had nothing. So I don't understand, in the midst of all of your frustration, I know you want to speak out, and I know you want people to understand your point, but there has to be a better way. And at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, you realize there's nothing left. That's where you live. No one else cares about your community except for you. So if you don't take pride in it, then what is there? So, well, Stephen, I appreciate what you said. Skip, your reaction to what's happening.
My 2 cents. I don't know Ray the way you know Ray. But when I watched that video of him yesterday, it struck me that that was a role that Ray Lewis was born to fill for that city. That was some powerful fire and brimstone message that he used almost through a veritable loudspeaker that can be the internet today. And it was, I hope, heard loudly and clearly by all those it was aimed at. And I, too, loved what our President Obama said, Stephen A. They aren't protesting, they're stealing. They're stealing, okay? I've always loved what LeBron James has said about any of these type of issues. The message gets lost when they turn violent. The anger those folks were feeling is perfectly fine, but expressing that anger by wrecking a CVS pharmacy is not effective, because all we see now is the video of the burned down, wrecked, looted pharmacy, and the message gets lost.
But there were days of peaceful protest.
Sure.
Unfortunately, it culminated.
Well, are we talking about a few here? Is that what we're talking about? A few?
I feel
or the
like
many?
It was organized, and then there were a few
to
get to another level.
Well, is that how you saw it? I don't know how to characterize that. It usually is the few harm the many.
Well, usually the few get the many involved in some kind of capacity. Yeah. And maybe somehow, some way, maybe one of these individuals can explain to me how stealing a bottle of soda improves your community, because that's what we saw people walking out of there. It's just ridiculous. But I also think, my man, chill out. Hold on. The point that I'm trying to make to you is this. When you sit here and you look at this, particularly when you look at the looting and the vandalism or whatever, you know, sometimes the message that gets disseminated is more powerful than the actual incidents itself. If you are seen stealing, and there's a whole bunch of black people there, and they're running away and they're stealing or whatever. Now, those are the actions of a few. But the problem is it taints all of these law-abiding citizens that are here. They look at, the society looks at all of us, and they say, is that how you're acting? Is that what you are about? Is that what you care about? And then we tend to generalize, and it gets so many more than those select few in trouble. And I just sit there and I find myself in amazement, because, again, we will get on professional athletes all the time. LeBron James, Derrick Rose, guys like that stepped up. Whether it's Trayvon Martin, whether it's Michael Brown, whether it's Mr. Gardner in Harlem, them brothers stepped up and highlighted and brought attention to an issue just so it could be addressed. But somehow, some way, you have a few that exacerbates the situation because of their ill intent, and they do far more damage to us than the benefits that those guys put forth a concerted effort to try and bring to the forefront. It's pretty sad, but I believe you address issues by making sure you hold folks accountable, because in the end, that is the ultimate language that folks understand. They're criminals, treat them like it, and deal with them accordingly, and we'll go from there.
Again, we want to obviously thank our colleague Ray Lewis for his very wise words. He will stay in Baltimore and miss the draft so that he can help the community there. We will have more First Take after the break.
Do what you're doing to this city. Too many hardworking people build this city.
Obviously, Ray Lewis, the Baltimore Raven for 17 seasons. That was his plea for peace. Meanwhile, for the very first time in Major League Baseball history, colleague Ray Lewis had to talk about it.
Violence is not the answer. Violence has never been the answer. Freddie Gray, we don't do nothing for him doing this. We know there's a deeper issue.
Peaceful protests gave way to rioting in Baltimore following the death of Freddie Gray on April 19th. Gray died of spinal cord and other injuries sustained while in police custody. And then as a result, obviously there was some unrest in Boston and in Baltimore. And
we know what the jungle looks like, but this isn't it. It's enough of us in the streets trying to change what's going on. Baltimore, get off the streets. Kids, go home. Stay home. You don't have no right to.
They will have the game tonight. The Orioles will play actually this afternoon, but there will be no crowd. That is by design. Stephen A., I'll start with you first. I think we all want to share our comments about what's happening in Baltimore, but what was your reaction?
Well, first of all, I was proud of my brother Ray Lewis